Hi, I want to say goodbye now to my Page Avenue, Lyndhurst backyard. It's a backyard I've enjoyed for 57 years of my entire life, and my family has enjoyed for about 63 years of their existence in our Page Avenue, Lyndhurst home. So, saying goodbye to the backyard, which has a history. It really does. Now, for the last, I'd say, couple decades at least, I haven't used the yard much. I'm not really an outdoorsy type person, so I don't use the yard that much. But when I was young, it's definitely served its purpose because this is where we had lots and lots of family summer picnics, especially around the 4th of July. Huge blowouts. And this here, okay, let me get it right here. Right there is the yard. And in that yard, we would have family picnics that had all of my aunts and uncles, dozens and dozens of cousins, and we'd have big, big blowouts. And my father made sure it was a party and a half. Lots of poker games, lots of liquor, lots of drinking, kids running around like crazy, having fun. It was wild. In the 1960s and 1970s, that's when we had most of our family picnics in this backyard. And in the middle there was a big fat tree in the middle where next to the garage. And underneath that big fat tree was a giant picnic table and a big bench, wooden bench and a giant wooden picnic table. And during the summer months, my family would have these giant backyard picnic extravaganzas. And they'd sit in the 1960s. They'd sit under the tree, on the bench, and on the picnic table, and they'd eat and drink all day long, and all the way well into the night with fireworks at night, the whole 9 yards. Then around the late 1970s, early 80s, my father cut the tree down because it got too old. They didn't like the branches falling. Cut the tree down and put up a metal canopy. The metal canopy, unfortunately, stayed up for a couple decades, but in the, I think the late 2000s, around 2009, 2010, the canopy collapsed under the weight of a snowstorm. After all those years, the canopy gave up. But we stopped having the picnics. The last picnic in the backyard was when my father was very sick with pancreatic cancer. It was 1991. And we gave him a farewell picnic, so to speak. It was the 4th of July weekend. And he passed away that following December. But the family gave him a farewell picnic and barbecue. And that was in July of 1991, because he passed away in December 1991. And that was the last, very, very last time we had an activity in the backyard here. Since then, this backyard has not really been used. I don't sit in it. I don't use it. Let me take you down, take closer look. Pardon the sloppy camera work. This here is my mother's rose garden. My grandfather planted it in the 1950s, and there's no roses now. This is late December, early January 2018, 2019. And this is my mother's rose bush here. There's no roses now. It's dead of winter. This, I think, was azaleas. When it blooms, it's azaleas. And this here is where the picnics were. The family picnics were right here. And there was the canopy. The canopy came down, and you can see where the canopy came down. It collapsed. That collapsed in the late 2000s, but it was up since the early 1970s. So this is where so many family memories were made. I want to show you something else. This is the backyard. When I was a very young child, I had a swing set back here. Right back here, swing set, right near the fence. Right here, had a swing set. Played on the swings with my friends. And this here fence is a very interesting story. This fence here separates 2 yards. Mine is here. That's my cousin's house. That brick house is my cousin's house. We're very, very, very close. Our childhood was spent together. We grew up together. And that house there, where my cousins live, this fence had an open gate there. There was an open gate throughout the 1960s and through most of the 70s. In the late 70s, my father decided to put a solid fence there because this open gate here allowed you to cross from backyard to backyard, which was great because we used to communicate with each other all the time. I used to go to my cousin's house, my cousin would come to my house, we'd go back and forth as kids all the time. But what happened was the kids in the neighborhood, this high school was over behind that house, Lyndhurst High School. And the kids in the neighborhood figured out that there was an open gate here. So they would cut through the backyards, my cousin's backyard. They'd walk through, they'd go through the open gate and come through my backyard to cross over to Page Avenue, from Forest Avenue to Page Avenue. And literally, this became a throughway for the high school students to cut through the yards. And they would cut through these 2 backyards forever. And I mean for 15, 20 years, they were cutting through these backyards. My father finally got sick of all these strange kids cutting through the yard after 15 years, right? And they decided to put a solid fence up to discourage crossing of the yard, which it worked because after the fence was put up and the gate was removed, the kids no longer came through the yard. Now, this is the back of the garage. This is an interesting story here. Okay, let's see here. This window, very interesting story. When I was a little kid, I don't know, I must have been about 10, 11 years old, something like that. I was trying to open up this window one day from here, from the back of the garage, outside. And I'm banging and banging and banging on the window, and I couldn't get the damn thing open. It wouldn't open. So I hit it so hard that this entire pane of glass came right out in one solid sheet. Didn't shatter, just came out as one solid sheet when I was banging on it. And it fell down. And of course, I was younger then, so I was around, I don't know, around here somewhere, this tall. I was very young, maybe 9, 10 years old. And this whole pane of glass came down and came right on top of the bridge of my nose and sliced my nose in half, right on top here. And I was bleeding like crazy, blood pouring all over my face. And I never liked doctors. I really never liked the medical world. I didn't like surgical procedures. I didn't like medical procedures. I didn't like doctors poking and prodding me or touching me. So I tried not to go to the doctor as often as possible. So I'm cut from this glass. I'm bleeding like crazy. And I refused to allow my mother to take me to the doctor. Yeah, I refused. I figured, that's all right. So I fixed it up. Put a Band-Aid on it and gauze and stopped the bleeding and everything else. And I took care of it. And because I did not want to go to the doctor. And my mother said, hey, you don't want to go to the doctor? That's your problem. And so for the next, I don't know, 25, 30 years, I'm not kidding, 25, 30 years after this, I had a permanent scar on the bridge of my nose as a constant reminder of this incident. And finally now that I look at it, that scar has basically gone away. It's taken a long time. What does it take? 45 years, 47 years? I'm 57 now, so around 45, 50, 47, 48 years, whatever it is, to heal. And it's gone now, but I wore that little scar across the bridge of my nose like a badge of honor because I refused to let a doctor put a stitch in me. In my whole life, I've never had a stitch, never got stitches. I've been cut, I've bled, but I refused to get stitches. Got scars all the time, but no stitches. So that's the story of this window. I'll never forget it. So anyway, that's this portion. I'm going to take you inside the garage and tell you a couple stories about the interior of the garage, but I'll do that in a separate video. This right now, I'm saying goodbye to my backyard, and My swing set was over there. The open gate was over there. It's my cousin's house back there. We were very, very close. I can't even tell you, just begin to describe to you how close we were, because we were just best friends growing up. And so we kept going back and forth between each other's house all the time. As a matter of fact, he would come to my house. It's so funny. Here's another story. I would take forever to eat dinner when I was a kid. This is the 1960s I'm talking about. I was a little boy, and I would be sitting at the kitchen table, and I would sit there eating dinner. And when I was very young, I was very, very thin. Before I was 10 years old, I was this thin, and I ate like a bird. I just pecked at my food. My mother was very strict Italian. You had to eat all your food. So I could not get up from the table until I ate all my food. But what I did was I took forever to eat. I took hours to eat when I was very young. Before I was 10, I actually can tell you the demarcation point. And he would come over, my cousin would come over, little boy, and he would sit out here on the picnic table underneath here. Remember I told you about the big giant tree was in the middle here, and there was a picnic table. And he would sit here on the bench of the picnic table and wait for me to finish eating so I can come out, and so we can come out to play. Well, it took me hours to eat. And he'd be sitting here and waiting, and he was so patient. And I have to say, God bless him. That's why he was my best friend, because he had the damn patience to sit there and wait for me until I ate. It was so funny. But I'll take you inside the garage, and we'll go over that in a separate video. And I just want to be able to remember the backyard, where so many memories of family picnics and good times and fireworks and lots of food. All my mother's sisters and she were cooking all day long. And my mother and her sisters were cooking up a storm. I'll never forget my Aunt Ida standing over the barbecue and cooking and cooking and cooking and cooking. Everybody was cooking. And just this whole area here was just teeming with family members and kids. And by the way, there was dirt here. This was all dirt here in the 1960s and early 70s. Then my father paved it with cement, and it was nice at that time. This hasn't been used since 1991, so it's kind of decrepit now. But prior, in the 1960s, in its heyday, and the early 70s in its heyday, this was dirt, and then the giant tree, the tree came down, then the pavement, and then the canopy came up, and then the canopy came down in 2009 or 8 or whatever it was, under snow. But the backyard hasn't been used in decades. The backyard has not been used since 1991. Was the very, very last family gathering. And even then, the last gathering before that was probably in the early to mid 80s, and then prior to that was in the late 70s. And like I said, throughout the whole 1960s, almost every summer, and the early 70s, almost every single summer, especially around the 4th of July, we had a giant blowout, because my father was a very patriotic guy. So 4th of July was a big, big event to him. So he loved the fireworks and the patriotism, and he'd wear red, white, and blue. And we have this giant, I'm telling you, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of family members back here, eating and smoking cigarettes, and drinking all day, poker games, lots and lots of fun. We'd have fun running around. It was just so much fun. It was good times, good times. Times have changed. People have died off. The family's almost shrunk considerably since then, from people passing away. So, but these are memories that we will always have. And I guess when you do these things, especially I encourage everyone now who have families, to do as much as you can with your families and make memories now. It's so important. But anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.